Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our worship today. Those of you who are here in person and those of you who are joining us by Zoom and Facebook Live and those who will join us later on the recorded version as well. Welcome to a new season in the church year. Thank you. A little closer. A new season in the church year, the season of Lent. So you can see we've
I think surrender means that I think what it is really is that when we talk like this, somewhere down in our heart we know it's true. So there's that in me that knows it, but there's that in me that doesn't know it yet. And over again, I'm giving opportunities to know that the universe is infinitely trustworthy, which is surrender. In other words, if ultimately speaking, infinity is already infinitely surrendered itself to me, and the reciprocity is for me to surrender myself. So I come up against boundaries inside where there's constantly renewed opportunities to surrender myself over to the trustworthy nature of what's happening to me. Whether you're in hospice or hanging on a cross, we're sitting out on a bench, cold, just so there's always just one thing going on.
You have to go through pain for rebirth?
Yes, well, we do go through pain, and through that pain, deeply surrendered to, we are reborn. And that's why I think too, not to mystify this, as in other words, it doesn't make us exempt from the human situation, but it delivers us into the incomprehensible stature of the human situation. But I went in once to see Thomas Merton for direction, and I was 18 years old, and I was complaining about something. I forget what it was. And he said to me, we didn't come here to find a rarefied space free from the suffering of the world. We came here to carry the suffering of the whole world in our heart. See? I was really struck by that my suffering doesn't belong to me. And so in my suffering, it unites me. Compassion is the body of emptiness, as the Buddhists say. So this Christ nature is that the infinite presence of God in the most intimate interior places that hurt are one. Here's how I put it. Let's say we draw like a trajectory like this. And on the trajectory, we're doing our sincere best to free ourselves and others from suffering, which is the moral imperative. But the extent to which I'm not able to free myself from suffering, the God is the intersection of that inability. See? So that the cutting edge of my inability to free myself from suffering, God is the infinity of that inability. And I think really, the stages of dying, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and so on. So when people come to acceptance, she says they're not happy. They don't say this dying is, I don't know when I've had more fun, really. She says they're beyond the dualism of happiness and sadness. And how I see it is, although they're still here, they've already crossed over. So this is freedom from the tyranny of death in the midst of death. See, freedom from the tyranny of suffering in the midst of suffering. So why wait to the hospice to find it out? See, what if we could find it out today? See? And
freedom now.
That's right, and I think that's the mystical teachings. See?
What's you said crucified love? What does that mean?
It is that see, when we're looking at it in Jesus and all of this way, then is that Jesus loved, and then he loved some more, and he died loving. He died loving as executioners. And how I put it, to me it seems, and then when he died, like the kenosis of God, the emptying of God, they pierced his heart, and blood and water flowed out, like at the birth of a child. And so then there was no more Jesus left in Jesus. And when there was no more Jesus left in Jesus, the only Jesus that was ever really there was manifested perfectly in the world. And then Jesus says, "Come follow me." sounds like a good idea till you see where he's leading you. And so,
and
yeah,
I said,
whoa, that's right.
That's not sustainable.
That's not sustainable. And so, but really, if we let ourselves be unraveled in a compassionate, paced way, so we don't get re-traumatized. You know what I mean? We're just a human being. But if we just follow this, we start unexplainably discovering these things that are so impossible to put into words. You know, you have to speak poetically or paradoxically. But how I put it too sometimes with people helps me to say that when we don't know someone very well, it's easy to say a lot about them. Like, let me tell you about so-and-so. If you love someone very deeply for a long, long time, you don't know what to say. And you know anything you would say wouldn't be what you know because you can't say it and your heart breaks when you try. Now what if that is a faint echo of God being hopelessly in love with us? So Michelda Magberg, she says that God revealed to her that he freely chose to be so hopelessly in love with her. He doesn't really know if he could handle being God without her. And she said, I told God, she said, take me home with you and I'll be your physician forever. See, and I think that's the mystic way. There's something unbearably beautiful unfolding everywhere. And that the root source of our sorrow is where we've lost experiential access to that one thing that sets us free. And those are the mystical teachings of all the world religions, really, I think.
What's the one thing?
Is this. No hindrance, nothing missing anywhere. Nothing missing anywhere. There's an infinite wholeness that utterly permeates the fragmentation of our lives. And go ahead, yeah, nothing's missing in. Yeah, nothing. Nothing's missing. Nothing's missing. Nothing's missing anywhere. That's liberation, I think, you know.
The saving love of God, the transforming peace of Christ, and the driving power of the Holy Spirit be with you all. And also with you. And now I invite you to let us pray together the prayer of the day. O gracious God, you led your people through the wilderness and brought them to your promised land. Guide us now, so that, following Jesus, your beloved, we may walk safely through the wilderness of this world, along the path of compassion and service, which you alone can give. Through Jesus Christ, our rescuer and ruler, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. Here, now I've got one of my friends you've probably met before.
Hello, Dick, glad you're here. Oh, look, it's Charlie. Hi, Charlie. Hi, Amber, how are you? Hi. Oh, look, there's all kinds of people here. And people at home, welcome.
Well, hello, Mapache. It's so good.
No. I'm not Mapache.
You're not Mapache the raccoon?
No. I am the marvelous Mapache superhero.
Okay. Just a couple of things. Usually, a superhero doesn't include their own real name in their superhero name.
Oh, I forgot. But that's okay, no one will know it's me, because I have this mask.
It's a very lovely mask, but it's actually part of who you are. You always have that mask.
Oh, that's right, I forgot. I have a cape. Yes, I have a cape.
Yes, you have a cape. That's excellent. Very good. Okay, marvelous Mapache. Just curious, what is your superpower?
I forgot about that. I don't know. Spilling! Yes.
I think it's pronounced spelling. I didn't know you were super good at spelling words.
No, not spelling. Spilling. like spilling garbage cans. I'm really, really good at it. That's my superpower.
Okay, I believe you. I believe you. You and many raccoons, I think. Well, today we're going to hear a story about someone else with a superpower. It's Jesus.
Jesus has lots of superpowers. He can feed thousands of people with just a little bit of bread. He can heal people. Oh, he's got lots of superpowers. Which one today?
Well, it's a little bit of a surprising superpower today.
Oh, okay, say more.
Well, today his superpower is trusting God.
Whoa! What? Trusting God? That's a superpower?
Well, it is for Jesus.
Say more.
Well, God had asked Jesus to go without eating for a long time.
That would be very hungry.
Exactly. But God, some people do that, especially during this season, as a way to help them really pay attention to God.
That works.
Well, yeah, sometimes for some people it works.
So he was really hungry.
Yes. And then somebody came to him and said, "Oh, hey Jesus, I see that you're hungry. Why don't you take this rock and turn it into bread, and then you can eat?"
Wow, that's a superpower.
Well, it is, but he used his better superpower of trusting God and said, "You know, God, I don't think that's what God wants me to do. God wants me to keep being hungry for a little while so that I can pay better attention to God."
So he used his superpower of trusting God and said no to changing the rock into bread.
Exactly. And then that same person said, "Hey, wouldn't it be great, Jesus, if you were in charge of the whole world and then you could kind of make people do the right thing?"
Oh, that's a good idea.
And so this person said, "If you'll just worship me, Jesus, then I'll make sure you're in charge of everything."
That's a terrible idea.
Exactly. And that's what Jesus said. That's a terrible idea, that we should worship only God, nobody else. And I will trust God to help me be useful in the world without doing something I'm not supposed to do.
So it's a superpower again.
Exactly. And then that same person said, what if, Jesus, you were to go up on a really high building?
That sounds scary.
Well, it's going to get scarier. He said, and if you throw yourself down off the building,
Oh, that's a terrible idea. Don't ever do that, Charlie. Don't ever do that.
no, but the person said is, it won't hurt you because God will send angels to swoop down and they'll catch you before you hit the ground.
That would be amazing.
And the person was like, if you did that, then people would see how amazing you were, and then everyone would believe you, and that's a good thing, right?
It is a good thing.
But Jesus said, nope, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to test God that way. I'm going to,
Let me guess. Trust God.
exactly, trust God.
That's his superpower.
Exactly. His superpower is trusting God.
So, Jesus has comebacks faster than a speeding bullet, and faith stronger than a locomotive, which is a train, in case you were wondering, and able to resist leaping off tall buildings, right?
Exactly.
Look, they're in the wilderness. Is it a wizard? Is it a conqueror? No, it is. What's his superpower name?
Usually just Jesus.
No. How about Captain Christ? Captain Christ. Yep. And his superpower is trusting God. And that's good.
Oh, of course it's good, because then he's able to save everybody because he trusts God. And so we don't have to be in charge of everything. We can trust Jesus because Jesus was really good with his superpower of trusting God, and that had helped him to heal and to feed and even to die and rise again to save all of the earth because of his superpower of,
What was it again? Yes, you were listening. She was listening.
I know.
Superpower of trusting God, which might even be better than spilling trash cans. Yeah, I think so. Amen. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye. I'm gonna go take my cape.
The Holy Gospel according to Luke, the 4th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. This episode takes place right after Jesus' baptism, when he saw the Spirit of the Lord coming down upon him, and he heard the voice saying, "You are my beloved, the chosen one." And immediately after that comes this. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Do you feel it in your body, in your breathing, in just the way your brain works these days? Experts say that we all are dealing with trauma because of this pandemic and how long it has lasted and the ways it has affected us. All of us in different ways, but every single one of us are affected by it in some way. Add to that for years now we've had these sharp divisions in our politics and in our culture. On top of that, some folks have had extra measures of trauma, having to flee their homes because of violence or severe poverty, wars, not only in Ukraine, but in Yemen and Ethiopia and elsewhere. And our sisters and brothers and siblings right here in Colorado who have lost their homes or have been traumatized by the Marshall Fire, such as those from Christ the Servant Lutheran Church in Louisville and Trinity Lutheran Church in Boulder, Colorado. We are worn down whether we recognize it or not. We've been carrying this and carrying it for some time now. And even though it seems like, I don't want to jinx anything, knock on some wood here, but it seems like maybe, at least in terms of the pandemic, we may be drawing near to the light at the end of the tunnel, and we've got some hope for that we can return to some semblance of, if not the former normal, a new normal, able to at least many of us gather together in person again. As we stumble toward that light at the end of the tunnel, we're still weighed down and worn thin by these traumas that we have been through. And being aware of that in our own selves this year, the Spirit led me to see this story that we heard from the first reading today from the book of Deuteronomy in a new light. This is Moses giving a sermon, a speech, a rallying cry to the people just as they're about to enter into the promised land. And for them, it's been not just a couple of years, it's been 40 years. 40 years of wandering in the wilderness and being vulnerable. And that's after many years before that of being slaves in Egypt. These are people who have been traumatized for generations. And here they are about to move into the land of hope and the land of promise. And Moses has words for them, things to tell them to prepare for this new normal they're about to experience. And then he says to them, don't forget. Don't put this all behind you and pretend it never happened. Remember, faithfully remember what you have been through. He says, remember that a wandering Aramean was your father, your forefather, whether that's Jacob or Abraham or both. And one of the senses of that we kind of miss out on with not so much translation of the words as translation of the meaning of that. To be wandering in that sense was to be vulnerable, was to be in danger. If you didn't have a safe place to be, then you were in trouble. This word wandering is often used for sheep who have gotten away from the flock. And sheep who are wandering are sheep who are in big danger. So one contemporary sense of that meaning that one scholar, Brian Jones, suggests is a destitute vagrant was my ancestor. A destitute vagrant is part of our history. And not just of the history of these folks, who are on their verge of entering the promised land, but they are part of our faith history as well. A destitute vagrant was our ancestor as well. These wandering Israelites, they are part of our faith history. All the history of the disciples of Jesus and the church and the things that we have done and the things that we have experienced, this is all part of who we have come to be in our relationship with one another and with God. Remember faithfully, says Moses. Don't forget it, because it's important for you to remember who you are and whose you are. Remember that your ancestors went through the horrors of slavery, through the vulnerability of wilderness, and had their own all too frequent lack of trust in God. And remember that through all of that God saw you, and God heard you, and God was with you, and God shared gifts with you. When you were hungry, God gave you manna in the wilderness, this mysterious, miraculous food when you thought there was no food. When you thought there was no water, God made water come forth from a rock in the wilderness. God was with you and provided for you. Maybe not in the way you would have hoped for, but God was there with you and shared from God's generosity with you. God walked with you through the trauma. And don't take that for granted, by the way. It's easy to do that. God could just as easily have said when the Israelites cried out as slaves in Egypt, and God heard them, God could have said, you know what, I prefer winners to losers. I actually prefer Pharaoh to you slaves. I think I'd rather have somebody who's mighty and powerful. And that's a temptation in the world today, to lean into and lean toward and to lift up those who seem to have worldly power because they seem to get things done. And they do it more efficiently than maybe we think God is about. But God was faithful to God's people. God walked with them, and God shared gifts with them, including the gift of blessing them, not just so that their lives would be better on their own, but so that they would be a blessing to all the rest of the world, blessed in order to bless all the nations. And so as the people are on the threshold of this new normal, not going back to what was, but moving forward, still shaped by the present trauma in their lives, Moses says, remember faithfully who and whose you are and how God has been present and generous to you all along. And live into that identity moving forward. When you find yourself settled in the new land, and you're actually able to have a plot of land, and you're able to grow food there, and you have enough to eat. And more than that, don't just think, well, that's because I worked really hard and I made good investment decisions. Remember that the land itself and your freedom are a gift from God for the benefit not only of yourself but of others. And so Moses says to them, make sure that you bring some of the first fruits of what you grow for others who are landless, for those who do not have the ability to provide for themselves, including, specifically, he mentions the alien among you, the migrant, the immigrant, the refugee. Make sure that your bounty is shared with them as well. I gave you that bounty not just for your own sake, but for their sake as well. And so we discover that we become part of the blessing of God. We don't just receive the blessing of God, we become part of the blessing of God for others as well. Trusting not in the power of tanks and bombs, but the power of self-giving love and undeserved grace. That love that we see embodied most fully in Jesus, who loves people who do not deserve it, including you and me, and loves us all the way to the cross and all the way to the grave and all the way into resurrection life, which changes everything for everyone all time. So we become not just people who are accompanied by God through our own trauma, but we become people who are healed in order to bring healing. We are people who are given hope in order to bring hope. We're people who are given bounty in order to give bounty to others who are in need, including our neighbors in Ukraine and Yemen and Ethiopia, including our neighbors who are crossing the southern border desperate for a life of safety, including our sisters and brothers and siblings recovering from the Marshall Fire. This is a word of hope, not just for you and me, but through you and me. And that is incredibly good news. That we don't just have hope, we have hope moving through us. And so as we drag our traumatized community into this future where God already awaits us, God is already preparing the way for us, we are blessed and we are empowered to remember faithfully and to share generously. Amen. The blessing. We are children of God, anointed with the oil of gladness and strengthened for the journey. Almighty and merciful God, motherly, majestic, and mighty, bless us, this day and always. Amen. And our
Bless now, O God, the journey that all your people make, the path through noise and silence, the way of give and take. The trail is found in desert and winds the mountain round, then leads beside still waters the road where faith is found. Bless sojourners and pilgrims who share this winding way. Your hope burns through the terrors, your love sustains the day. We yearn for holy freedom, while often we are bound. Together we are seeking the road where faith is found. Divine eternal lover, you meet us on the road. We wait for lands of promise where milk and honey flow. But waiting not for places, you meet us all around. Our covenant is written on roots as faith is found.
Go in peace, serve the Lord. By the presence and power of God, we will.